Okay, we're recording again.
How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the science of fantasy football. Why the science of fantasy football? You get a meteorologist together with a biologist. They're going to use the scientific method. That just means we're going to let the statistics guide us to an answer. And here's the key, folks. Each time you get new data, it might change your outlook on a player. It might not. There's a lot of data that has to be brought in to the equation, but each and every week we will use the scientific method to make our best educated guesses on the future. And joining me as he does every week, he is the fantasy professor. He's a real professor. It's John Bush. And John, the best game of the week, I think, is already done and
Yeah,
gone.
that was early on. I was pessimistic, but I am a pessimist, and I was saying, "Oh, it's Thursday night magic, ho hum," and then all of a sudden, boy, it just caught fire. And in fact, I needed them to play another quarter. I needed some more points, Dennis. I was greedy, and I didn't play enough of some of them there, and I needed a few more points. I'm never satisfied, folks. It's never, rarely do I say, man, I'll take no more points. I can't take it. No, 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 no. I'm always, give me that touchdown. And you and I were having a Twitter texting fit on all the stuff happening. It was wonderful, great. I love uh, tens of points. I love over 70 or whatever it was, close to 70, wasn't it? Maybe was it
Oh,
over
yeah.
70?
Yeah, 74 points total.
Love it. I wish every game could have that. Can you imagine? It would be, people shouldn't be complaining then, but hopefully, given all the questionable, Dennis, I use the Dennis concept, play them if they're active versus waiting for mystery players that may not play, like Drake London's out.
Oh, yeah.
A Doomsday's out, so if you were waiting for them and you skipped, I don't think you skipped the Sun God, but if say you were waiting for whoever, say Monty, Monty got you some points. He didn't lose your week. He may not have won it, but he was a solid points here. I think what do you have, about 14, 12?
14. Yep.
Huh?
14,
Yeah.
14
Hey,
points.
14 is above median. That puts money in my pocket, I hope, versus Drake London, right? Which is zero. So, yeah, I'll take 14. So, Dennis's concept, and it's just logic. Dennis is kind of got that Vulcan in him. He says, look, if I got these flex players that are active versus these, I don't know, questionable, I'm going to lean in a lot of my shares. I'm not saying you couldn't have held a few London shares or Doomsday out just in case, but now as it's all cleared, I bet you'd wish you'd played somebody like Montgomery instead of London. If that was your final flex, I know you're thinking, wow, now what am I doing? You're scrambling, Dennis, for your
Oh, yeah.
flex
Yeah.
if you waited for London or Doomsday or Marvin Harris or somebody.
Yeah, and at the time we thought a Doomsday going into Thursday night, we thought a
Yes,
Doomsday in London were likely to play. We were
yes.
pretty pessimistic on Harrison. We
Hmm.
thought he would be out. But but here's the difference of how I look at Thursday night football on a weekly basis. And here's how I break down whether I do the play them all thing. So I looked at one team on FFPC and I had five of my regular starters because remember, on Tuesday morning, first thing I do is I say, okay, I'm not even looking at defensive matchups. I'm just looking at who are the best players. And I sort them that way. I put my two best running backs in the running back slots, two best wide receivers in the wide receiver slots, and my two best flex in the flex. And that's before I look at any weekly data. It's just based on my MVP index, my rating system for the players. And I don't even look at injuries. Okay. I don't care if a guy is listed as questionable, or doubtful. I'm going to, like a Sun God, I had him in my lineups. And I had actually had a message from one of the commissioners. This was about 2 hours before the game. Oh, remember to get Sun God out of your lineup. He's hurt.
Shit.
Because Sleeper was giving him a 0 projection because they didn't expect him to play. And I'm sitting there going, he's a son freaking God. I'm not taking this guy out until he's out. Like he's in my lineup every week, regardless of matchups. Okay. That's like a no-brainer. But when I get to a Thursday night game like this, the first thing I look at is the over-under. I handle a 34 much different than I'm handling a 54. A 54, I'm 34. I'm looking for excuses to play anybody. I'm like, don't want to. And with a 54, it's like I'm looking for an excuse not to play the guy. I'm gonna play everybody. I'm gonna fire up every share I've got, and this was the only week that I have fired up all of my David Montgomery shares. I'm happy with 14. I'm thrilled with 14. Remember, we have 4 teams on bye this week. So that's a lot of talent that's missing. And then a lot of questionable guys have now gone to out. But that's my first sort. In my reaction is different. Even with a 54, it's different depending on how many guys I have listed questionable. If I got one guy listed questionable on my entire starting lineup, then I don't really worry about Thursday night forcing guys into a lineup. I'm going to obviously play the guys that I think are going to be really solid. But Montgomery and even Jameson Williams this year, and even Goff, are kind of like those guys that I will start many weeks, but not automatic. And it's very rare that I've got all my Goff, Montgomery, and Jameson Williams shares in action at the same time. Like Gibbs and Sun God, they're in there. They ain't coming out, obviously. Thank you, Captain Obvious, for telling us the best players at their position in fantasy football are great starts. But what I'm getting at is if I have a lot of questionable guys, then I'm really looking and saying, oh God, I got 5 questionable guys. Maybe 2 of them don't play. What's my option? And if my option's a Thursday night guy, I'm rolling the dice on that. Last week, I had a situation where I had that same problem. And what did I do? I pivoted to playing both DJ Montgomery and Mon and Jay. Just like this week, I played both Montgomery and Gibbs. I don't have a problem with that. Because if one guy's down, one guy gets vultured on a touchdown at the goal line, the other guy got it. So I'm looking at the collective points between the two. And if you ain't happy with 51 out of your running back slot, then you're playing the wrong game. Because that's an abnormally high total, just like last week with the Bears. If you played both Mon and Jay and Swift and you got 39 points out of your starting running backs and you're not happy with 39, you are never going to be happy in fantasy football. That's a tremendous score for your 2 running backs. But each lineup is different. But this week, 54, I'm looking for excuses to get guys into the lineups. I cannot play enough Dallas and Detroit guys because it's a slam dunk. You're going to be playing everybody. Played a lot of my Dak shares. I played almost all of my Dak shares. Played most of my Goff shares and played all of my Montgomery shares this week.
I was right. What I did was Monty. I put instead of Adele right now. Doesn't mean I'm not swinging if Hampton's out that I'm not ready to jump in.
Yep.
but I was kind of holding that flex, Dennis, for Vidal until I knew what Hampton. Once I figured out that Hampton might play, looking pretty good that he is, and Monty, and I figured the high over under 54, you and I was like, this guy, I texted you, I figured 12.
Yeah.
I texted
Yep.
you before or, early in the game, 12. That's what I thought. And so I was like, do I take 12 or do I gamble for Vidal being the dog? And it's like, nah, I'll take the bird in the hand. So again, that same concept of weighing the bird in the bush, bird in the hand concept that I think they're afraid, and it maybe it's just experience, but if you start looking at median, if you start thinking not as, anything else other than just where am I going to get is median okay? Can I be happy with that? Yes, they will not lose you the week if you can get median. And that Dennis has hammered that home to me with his MVP and being with him for the last 3 years. That is ingrained that concept that I really didn't have. I mean, I kind of did, but not. Having a research partner, which Dennis is great. Look at his picture. He's got, I mean, this is how it's a chalkboard. His wife said, what are we going to do for our decoration? Well, we'll just add another chalkboard over here. That's what Dennis does. That's his life right there. There's the football. There's his lab coat. He comes home and everybody has the pipe and slippers. Dennis slips on his tie and his lab coat, and he, has chalkboards everywhere. And I guess he's a good enough guy that he can satisfy his young lady, his wife, and cook and clean, and still has chalkboards everywhere. Love it, man. He is my role model. He is my Felix, right? If I'm Oscar, that's how it is. He's my. Y'all don't get that, but the old folks would. And there's his chalkboard. But anyway, that's the concept: is understanding median and where that is, and thinking that everybody's above average. That's a hard thing to do. George Carlin did that, right? I'm above average driver. It's like, his jumbo shrimp, he'll do
Yeah.
jumbo shrimp. And it was just like, okay. Carlin helped educate me. Richard Pryor helped educate me as a young man. Cheech and Chong. I
Oh
learned a
yeah.
lot through the comedy records, horse track, you know, and now fantasy football. It's just part of my learning curve. But median with Monty, 12 points. I was happy. And if Hampton is out, I'm flipping Vidal where it is logical to flip him.
And I have a little different mentality of how I attack a lineup. And, my RB1 and my WR1s, I want a guy who's got the capability of hitting 16 or more consistently. Okay. That's what I want in those slots. Doesn't mean you always get it, but that's what I want as my top running back, my top wide receiver. By the time I get down to my flex, I get double digits. I get 10 or more. And I'm okay with that because I've done the math. And this is FFPC based with this logic. We play for total points every week.
Yes.
If every week I can hit 140 points or more every week, 140 points or more, I'm golden. I am going to be just fine making the top six. And that's really what you're striving for in fantasy football, is making the playoffs. I want to make the playoffs in as many leagues as possible. And I know for FFPC, that number is 140 every week. Doesn't mean I'm going to be the top scorer. In fact, sometimes you need 200 points to be the top scorer. But if I'm at 140 every week, I'm making the playoffs because I will have those big weeks where I'm 170, 180, 190, 200, 210 was my best scorer all year. But if I just avoid being under 120, like that's when you get punished when it's a total points league. And if you look at best ball, the formula is a little different, but you look at our best ball superflex team, if people looked at that roster, especially quarterbacks, they go, man, you guys get your butts kicked. We're in first place. We're hanging on to that first place, even though our quarterbacks have been kind of bleh. But it just shows you can build a team in a variety of ways. And if you build your team, and I'm not just saying consistency, okay? I'm saying consistent upside. There's a big difference. And we know how to spot those consistent upside guys. It's volume. If I've got a guy getting 20 touches or more every week at running back, I'm feeling good about starting that guy. And that's a rare feat nowadays. If I have a wide receiver getting 7 or more targets every week, I have a tight end getting 5 or more targets every week, I have a running back getting 5 or more targets every week, I'm feeling good about that player because I know that the points come if you get the volume. And I understand Woody Marks has been a classic circumstance of sort of beating the odds on that because Woody Marks has given me enough volume. He's been in that high teens volume and he's not performing when it comes to points because he's just not getting in the end zone. But I'll lean into that 17 plus in volume every single week. He's not my RB1. He's a last flex on your team. And if you build around volume, he's not going to let you down. And even his bad weeks, so he's at 7, 8 points. That's what he's been doing. That's not going to kill you. It's not going to make you win, but it's not going to kill you. And when I looked at Montgomery this week, I'm like, they're gonna up his volume. They want to run the ball. They want to move this ball on the ground to eat some clock because they're afraid of Dak. I'd be kind of afraid of Lamb, Pickens, and Ferguson myself. Those are 3 very good guys. And they have all 3 of them as targets. That's hard to defense. So I knew they wanted to run the ball more. And I felt pretty confident that I was going to get better volume because weeks 11 and 12, you did not get the volume. You've been lacking volume 5 of the weeks for Montgomery this year, and that's new. That didn't happen last year. But we felt pretty confident that we were going to get volume out of Montgomery. We knew Gibbs was going to have a big week, but we felt pretty confident of getting a little more volume out of Montgomery, and it paid off. I'll take 14 every day for my flex starter. And yeah, you're moving him up to the running back slot, but he's still a flex starter in essence. But very good Thursday night game.
It was a good game. I enjoyed it. It was, like I said, I was just greedy. I wanted lots and lots
Oh, yeah.
and never happy unless I can get lots and lots of points.
So how
And
about my guillotine league, Professor?
yeah,
My last guillotine league that I'm in that I survived.
yeah,
We're down to the final 5.
yeah.
Jamar Gibbs as my RB1.
Nice.
37 points. I pretty much matched or beat everybody left in the league, and they all had 2 starters. I only had 1. That's a huge advantage in a guillotine league. So I'm feeling pretty good going into the rest of week 14.
That is nice. That is nice. Dennis, I wanted to change. Let me find, before we do our plays here, let me find what I'm looking for here. And I'm going to set this up. Okay. So, let okay. So, Dennis and I were discussing spike players, having to define spike players. And we had some concepts we were going to test. So, one of those concepts, I believe the question I had, do spike teams have more spiky players? Or is it irrelevant? I think it's an important question because if there's a team component to that question, then that may actually get us closer to the answer. If it's not team related, then that makes it a little harder because then everything's on the table. So, and I'm not sure this is how to define a spiky team, Dennis, because I've never heard anybody define spiky team. People will use spiky players, but they really don't tell us what that means to them. It's another one of these boom bust, it's their season, sleeper. It's
League
these
winner.
nebulous terms that people, again, I think if you're a pundit or whatever they call themselves, and if you don't define it, then just about any result can be says I told you it's a sleeper. You know, what? That doesn't seem like a sleeper to me. My definition is different than yours. But if you don't define those, it makes you, it's like somebody who doesn't know the meaning of the big word but uses big words anyway. That's what you're coming across like, folks. And so in science, anybody that's inventing new concept is you spend time trying to define. When you design an experiment, it's all wrapped around your definition. The reason you put all that down, because somebody could replicate. We have peer review, people look over your work. We also have people trying to replicate your work. So if nobody defines spiky or sleeper, then it's hard to replicate. And that's why one of the reasons I want to do posters at the expo, I want to develop a society of researchers that we can define things, at least among us. And I think that will give us an advantage because we're within and have verbiage that people can replicate the research, and that's the foundation for a scientific approach. And I believe that's the way we should go. And doing posters at Fantasy is my way to start that ball rolling. Like I said, I'm probably not the champion to carry it over the finish line, but I can start. And so I'm hoping, 50 years from now, of course, they'll be all talking heads and robots. There won't be any humans left, but they're playing, fantasy robot football or whatever it is, that they'll remember old Dr. Bush and crazy Dennis there with his chalkboard house. And they'll remember us that we started this concept. Anyway, spiky. So what I did, Dennis, is spiky teams. I thought, okay, let's look at targets. Let's look at targets. So all targets for a team. And then I define the top 20% over 13 weeks and the bottom 20%, the green and the red. And so this figure shows a team is highlighting green. That means they had at least 4 weeks or more of top 20% in targets, not points, not wins, just targets. Then we had in red is below having at least 4 bad weeks. So I'm trying to define the upside spike, right? The high spike and the low spike. So, Dennis, I have highlighted the teams that fit those definitions. So now with your other metrics, or we can get into it, but I'm defining a platform for us to investigate Arizona, Cincinnati, Dallas, Denver, Houston, to look, are there wide receiver threes on there or twos that are showing some spiky characteristic? Don't know, may not. Maybe the spikes are in the bad spike teams, the low spikes, right? I don't know, but now I've got a platform to test the question, Dennis. So this data is interesting by itself, but it is a platform to get deeper on the off season. But I just wanted to start defining a spiky team a little bit. So I did that. Then I looked over here at grand totals, and you can see the highs and the lows. And then, just for my knowledge for the playoffs, I was curious what teams have been hot recently. So I call it the late versus early targets. So the ones that have been doing a lot more lately are in green, the ones that haven't are in red. So again, that may be not answering the spike question, but it's already here. I might as well gather that data too. So you can do multiple explorations. You're not stuck with one experiment, Dennis. One thing to learn if you ever go back, Dennis, if you ever go back and get your PhD in meteorology, if you do that, never do one experiment and then start the next one. Dovetail and do
Oh yeah.
multiple experiments at the same time, that you can get lots of answers and things happening. But you can't just do one experiment. In biology, sometimes you have to wait for the critters to grow up, right? If you're
Right.
studying
Yep.
butterflies, you have
Yep.
to wait for the caterpillars to hatch. Then you got the butterfly to do the experiment. So you better have some caterpillar experiments too. While that's happening, you can test the caterpillars, right? Maybe you're feeding them, Rice Krispie treats, right? Old Pops over here, give them Rice Krispie treats, or maybe, Jack Link's beef jerky, see if they grow a little fur, whatever. But that's the experiment, Dennis. And then what happens to the butterfly, or they have fur on the wings or not? Does Jack Link's jerky make you a Bigfoot? I don't know. Anyway, so I got that data. Okay, and I'm going to set it all, Dennis, and I'll let you uh, go. So then I said, let's look at the average overall 13 weeks for targets, and it's 31. Team average 31. That's running backs, tight ends, wide receivers. I mean, that's a lot of activity. So I subtracted each week by 31, and anything above 31 is in blue, anything below is in red. And then I noticed the teams that had a lot of blue: Arizona, Cincinnati, Houston, I think at least four or so blues. And then see, did I have, I think I mislabeled Jacksonville. That's good. I did want to see, sometimes I catch data. Yeah, blue. But so I was looking to see who was high and who was low here. The Chargers are interested, Dennis, because they have a -4 is red. So one, two, three, four, and they had blue one, two, three, four. So
Huh.
they're exactly equal. So I wasn't sure what color. They would probably be more orange, maybe, because they were both. They've had a Jekyll and Hyde kind of concept there. So anyway, I did that, and then I looked at the grand total. So the total average of these averages, right? 13. So here's the average, and then I'm looking to see what's going on there. So that was my data. That is allowing me to investigate then spiky players on these teams based on their team, and I'm in quotes because I'm not sure I'm finished with the definition spiky. spiky teams. And that's all my research for this week. See the pre-show, we talked about other kind of research.
Yeah, I love this concept because when you start into a study, you don't always know where it's going. That's the big difference between using the scientific method. So you had an idea that, a question
Yes.
to ask. Is there, first of all, how do you define a spiky team? So
Yes.
you came up with a definition.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean you're married to that definition
Nope, it could
forever.
change.
You could adjust and tweak that. My idea of a spiky game for a player, for a running back, wide receiver, tight end is 15 points, 15 PPR points. That to me, 12 is the median for running backs and wide receivers, a little lower for tight ends.
Right.
I use the same number for all three because anything we develop as a tool, we want to use as a flex play formula. Okay. Yes. So you got to grade everybody the same, but then you compare the tight ends to tight ends. And, a guy like Trey McBride, he's more like an RB9 or a WR9 who's eligible as a tight end. That's a huge advantage. But what I like about research like this is it's not a straight road. There's so many people that want an answer and they want it now.
Chop the wood now. Dennis, I want my fire.
In research, it's never that easy. Okay. Years ago, I started out trying to understand forecasting San Francisco weather. It was a unique formula or unique problem to forecast because most of what happened in their weather was under where the models were really good at forecasting. So you had to get better than the models, which is hard to do in meteorology. You can beat the models on any given storm, but if you tried to go at it without the models, out of 100 times, the models have beat you 60 times. You might be able to, and this is short-term forecasting, this is 18 hours out.
Right.
You might be able to beat, the models have beat you 60 times out of 100. And 45, you'll beat the models and, or 35, you'll beat the models, and 5 will be a push. Now, if I use the models as part of my forecast, but I combine that with what I call meatball meteorology, just understanding atmospheric physics and understanding how things are going, and also what has happened since the last model run. If I do that, now I can beat the model alone. The man-machine mix is always better than a forecast model all by itself, because the forecast model is just looking at the ideal solution for the problem. It's a numerical approximation of what's going to happen. In fantasy football, we have the same problem. But just like building a numerical model for weather forecasting, you're not sure what all the right ingredients are. And in weather forecasting right now, one of the problems that we're having with forecast models and why they're getting so irregular is the data that feeds the models is more sparse than it's ever been. You have fewer weather balloon launches. You have fewer reliable weather sites across the country. And so you have got bigger gaps in data, and that's leading to more uncertainty. In fantasy football, we have to define where those gaps in the data are. We know volume's important, but volume can really change from week to week. So we have to do studies like this to try to understand, are certain teams more volatile? are certain teams more likely to produce higher volume? And what are the characteristics of those teams? Maybe some of them are bad defenses. So they're playing from behind a lot. We don't know that yet. This is the first step in trying to understand what's going on with the data. This won't be the only step that the professor takes. This is step A. He's got the whole rest of the alphabet to go before this gets refined.
Yeah.
But my MVP concept took almost 20 years to develop. It takes seasons. We're getting quicker in how we turn over data because we're getting to understand what to look for. And 30 years ago, I didn't have a clue what I was looking at. I thought year-end projections meant something because they did in fantasy baseball, and that's where I started playing. But in fantasy football, it's such a different game. Injury situations are different than in baseball. And the variables are much different than in baseball. Plus, you have fewer games. You have 162 games, 162 data points in Major League Baseball that go into a fantasy football season or fantasy baseball season. You got 17 weeks that go into deciding in that last week. The 17th game is usually a throwaway for a lot of teams. But that data is still important because sometimes players that emerge in that worthless game for fantasy football because titles are done. Sometimes that data alone gives us a peek to the future. And I think what the professor's trying to do with this data is to see, are there relationships between the player and the team level of looking at the data? The answer might be no. But that answer of no lets us know, okay, we'll look somewhere else.
Yeah, I'll pack my bags and roll.
But I think what we're going to see, Professor.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
That's
I think
okay.
what we're going to see is the team level might give us a focus on those secondary players to look for. Like, I'm pretty confident that we're going to get the top 12 right most often in fantasy football. We'll at least get 10 of the top 12 running backs, right? Other than injuries.
Yeah.
We'll probably get 10 of the top 12, and so will everybody else. That's not where you make your money in fantasy football.
It's those flexes.
Yeah. So I think this data that you're doing, this research that you're doing, has the potential to pay off. It's such a much higher level because it's going to identify those secondary players that we want. For instance, we're leaning into Devonta Smith a lot.
Yeah.
The last few seasons, and he's a very spiky player.
And Philadelphia's a low spike kind of team this year.
And they've been a low volume team. If you look at it, they're a lower passing volume team.
Yes. They have one blue.
So maybe leaning into Devonta Smith, while he gives you the reward of some big weeks, maybe you don't want to be looking there.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to be looking at Dallas and Denver and other teams to see where those secondary players are. Because those secondary players, if you are right, first 3 rounds, if you get hammered by injuries, it's going to hurt your chances of winning in fantasy football. It just is. But the real money is made from the 8th round down. And it has to do with your roster management as well as the players you pick. But how cool would it be to go into a season understanding, okay, Arizona has been one of the spikiest teams over the last couple of years from this definition of spiky team.
At least this year.
At least this year. Let's say that this data has been true for the last 3 seasons. We'll look at it. We'll know. But let's assume for this argument that this is a typical Arizona year. If this is a typical Arizona year, next season, I'm kind of looking and going, where are the bargains on Arizona? Because those are the guys that I want. I want the bargains from good teams. I don't want the bargains from shitty teams. That makes no sense at all. I want the guys that have the potential of being those upside players. And that's what I'm looking for.
And just to, I have touches for last year, and I don't know why this icon is here. It's weird. There it is. I've got targets for 2024, Dennis. I could answer that question pretty quick if we want to. I won't today, but folks, I could look at 2024 and then I'll have a list compared to this year. And that's what things I'm going to be doing. But again, you got to have the database to look at it. And again, it may be positional. Maybe I need to look at, instead of teams, maybe positions, maybe running backs, maybe there's a different spiky definition than tight ends or wide receivers. So go to the next level down.
Yes.
I just started, as you say. Just start.
This is the beginning of the journey, folks, but I already see enough here to know that I'm predicting right now. I'm going to predict we will find 2 or 3 nuggets in this data that will help make us more money next year.
That's what I'm hoping.
And when I say nuggets, I'm talking about nuggets that we don't find through other typical ways of looking at the data.
Yeah.
And that's the whole game plan here is, and why concepts like COM and the Bush number and MVP have been successful for us is because we're looking at a unique group of players versus what other people are looking at. And yes, my data, the professor's data, it's a no-brainer. Gibbs is going to be up there. Okay. It's not like we're ranking Gibbs at 15th. Okay. But the key is the guys that are 15th through 25th, we have a better idea of understanding who those guys are than our competition, because we know where we're going to be sitting when it comes to consistency. And that's the game in fantasy football, is understanding how to build a roster with guys that have as much upside potential for at least 4 to 6 weeks a season. That's like, I'm not even asking for a guy I draft outside of the first 7 rounds. First 7 rounds, I'm hoping those guys are starters every week when they're healthy. Once I get to round 15, I get 4 good weeks out of a player where it was forecastable that they were going to be good. Like in best ball, you don't even have to worry about that because you just put them on the team and let it go. But when you have to set a lineup, it's not enough to have spiky weak guys. It's to understand when to use those. And sometimes it's just, hey, I got 3 guys on bye. I need a sub. This is a guy I'm putting in. It's not very you're not very deep on the reasoning, much like my money shares this week. Like I got 5 guys on that are questionable. I'm firing this guy up in every single league because I know that 10 to 12 points is probably what I'm getting. And that's good enough for me in my final flex position.
Agree. Like I said, I just wanted to start the process of thinking about spikes a little bit. Dennis and I were discussing that question, and that's what inspires my research, Dennis. And now, unless you want to extend this, I thought we might take a few games and go through them, and then we'll get ready for our matchup lab, the Squirrels and the Huskies coming up. But for our program, what do we want to focus on? A couple of
Well, we know
games.
Buffalo and Cincinnati and Rams in Arizona are Huskier games will be on the matchup lab. We also know that Cleveland, Tennessee, and Philadelphia and the LA Chargers. Now, that's a very intriguing game. That will also be one of our squirrels on the matchup lab. One of the games I'm really curious about this
Mm-hmm.
week, Indianapolis and Jacksonville.
Yeah, so I, I will put the power rankings, Dennis. Indy and Jacksonville. Jacksonville is here. Indy is there. So power
Wow.
rankings, Indy has the advantage, but they're both above average, but I would say top tier versus next tier. I think that, with Taylor, with Pittman, with the tight end there, was it Warren? Who is it?
Tyler Warren. Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty dynamic. The
Oh, yeah.
Jacksonville has struggled to find that wide receiver, right? It Meyer, is it Thomas? Is it, I mean, it hasn't been the clarity hasn't been there in the wide receiver. So I think that's what's making the difference is the sureness of Indianapolis. It doesn't mean that you should bet this. It's just part of this is rating the player potential, and the potential has been shown as, let's say, more sure, right? Less uncertain in Indianapolis, Jacksonville, but the Trevor Lawrence has been doing quite well. So we have that. I have the predictive pass to rush ratio this week. And by the way, Washington is all in on passing, Dennis. Your
Wow.
McLaurin shares and Samuel, that could be some goodness if you need a flex tiebreaker there.
Yep.
So Jacksonville, trying to find who's going to be running, and let's see. I'm trying to. Okay, here's Jacksonville on the run side, less on the passing. And Indy is right there, more on the passing than the rushing. So this predicts more passing in Indy. This predicts more rushing relative to their usual situation. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. Let's see, number 5 here. Here we go. 25-22. It's almost
That's
a pick
tight.
'em.
That is tight.
47. Jacksonville's at home, but they're not favored. Indy is favored playing away. If you look at the DAPS, I mean, there's nothing that scares me. Looks like Warren, looks like the quarterback is fine. I wouldn't play the kicker. You could stream the defense, but I think there are better ones here. Jacksonville, it's almost play them all. I don't think I'm worried about the rushing or the passing. It looks pretty good here. It looks like Brenton Strange could continue his goodness here coming back from injury. I'm definitely probably playing him in a few that I had right here. Wouldn't stream the D. Jacksonville is 71 efficient, Indianapolis 92. So Indianapolis does have the advantage in the power rankings and the efficiency That's yards, actual scoreboard points per second. Indy does have that advantage as well. But again, Jacksonville is at home. Jacksonville, they're good away or home. They're going to be biased to the rush a little bit, Dennis. Less pass at home. That's exactly what is predicted this week. They are improving team in the last 3 weeks compared to their season. So they're moving up. Indy, on the other hand, away is passing 8%, rushing less. So Taylor figures to get a little less work this week, and Indy is declining the last 3 weeks relative to their early in the season. So we got a improving versus a potentially declining. Hence, look at Vegas. Basically, it's a pick 'em to me. Anything less than two, I don't know how you can hang your hat on a spread of 1.5. Dennis, this could, in other words, regardless of what Dennis says on his favorite team, I'm not surprised because this data is saying it's that close. But I don't know if there's any weather that may break the tie. If there's rain, then that might favor uh, Indy a little bit there, but I'm sorry, Jacksonville a little bit because Indy's trying to pass more than rush, but I don't know that. So I like both, and I'm not in my pick 'em. I think I might have went Indianapolis, but maybe Dennis will change my mind.
Well, I shouldn't be changing your mind because
Oh yeah, you do, Dennis.
you've been kicking everybody's butt this year. So I know you haven't been listening to me because I'm way behind you
Yeah,
when it
but you'll
comes to
have
these.
like even a blind squirrel can find an acorn, Dennis. You got those chalkboard eyes, and every once in a while, you land on a good thing. So I got the big ear listening here.
So I do think there is going to be rain for this game. It's not the typical Florida pop-up shower and it's gone. It is a
Right.
frontal boundary that could bring a steadier rain, a winter rain to Jacksonville this weekend. And I'm not sure what that does to the game, you know,
Mhm.
but I do think I like the under here, with a little bit of weather. I am really tossed up. I can make a good case for both Indianapolis or Jacksonville winning this one, but I'm going to take Jacksonville at home. And I'm going to take them at home because the depths don't tell me anything as far as anything definitive. India's changing kickers this week. So they got rid of Badgley, who was on a lot of my teams. So I had to pivot from there. And I'm going to just take the home team. I'm going to take the home advantage. But boy, I'm not sure I'd bet that. And I do like the under on this as well. Well, we got a great grudge match battle for first place in the NFC North. We've got Green Bay hosting the Chicago Bears.
Chicago Bears. Let's see. Green Bay, Dennis Rutrow,
Woo!
and Chicago. Uh-oh. So they're both below league average, but Chicago's closer than Green Bay. So I'm a little concerned about Green Bay's chances right there. Predictions says, let's see, where is Chicago here?
Middle of the
Nobody's
board. Middle.
middle.
Yep.
There's so it's about balance. Let's see, a Green Bay down there, or is it Green
A
Bay?
little bit lower in the red. First
Yeah,
in the red.
a little bit to the rush, which is not surprising. So Chicago, a little more passing. How about that? So that's my takeaway there. Let's see, game 11. Let's see here, Dennis. 10, 11. 6 points. See, Vegas,
Ooh.
to me, Vegas, I think it's closer than they think, but Vegas says Green Bay stomps one touchdown favorite over Chicago because Green Bay is at home. Dennis, three of that is home field advantage. And look at the D for Chicago, Rutrow, a lot of tough in there. Chicago's won't pass, so maybe, and a Doomsday's out, so DJ Moore and Burden and Loveland, but they got Komet. I wouldn't play any of the D's, wouldn't play any of the kickers. Concerned about the tight end for Chicago. I'm a little worried about Chicago based on these stats. Green Bay, it's almost play them all except the defense and the kicker. But look at the wide receiver. If Reed comes back, I think I'm playing him, Dennis. We're going to have that debate.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's coming off IR. Have you heard anything on that? But I think
Haven't heard anything definitive, but every site that I've checked has put up a healthy projection for Reed. So the people doing projections believe he will be active this week.
Yeah. And the efficiency is the same, no difference. Green Bay, Dennis, they love away. So home is 26% less. Can you believe that? For whatever reason, they've done much better efficiency wise elsewhere than at home. That is real strange. But at home, they want to rush and pass less. And I'm not sure that's what Chicago's defense will give them. So they're going to have to fight that tendency and pass a little more than they're used to. They are improving, though. Jordan Love has been improving last 3 weeks. Chicago away is actually better than as far as their passing and rushing. Maybe they're not good enough putting points up, but it shows 8% more rush and pass, and that's good because they can be a little bit more dynamic to try to keep up with Green Bay. This seems to imply Green Bay just knocks it out of the park over Chicago, and I'm just not sure I'm buying this, Dennis. What say you?
Cold day up in Green Bay. I think there'll be a game time temperature in the low 20s, if that. And that makes me think that Chicago is going to lean more into that rushing game, which they did very well last week. So, I'm going to pick Chicago in this one for the upset. And I think it's going to be a low scoring game, though. That's the one area of confidence I have. I would go with the under in this one. I'd probably lean into both Swift and Montague this week because I think the volume is going to be there. And it's just a matter, do both guys get in the end zone? Does only one get in the end zone?
Yeah, how are we going to play that, Dennis?
I'm going to consider playing both guys in lineups this week because I think combined between the two of them, I think you're going to get 25 points. So between the two of them, I think you're going to get a healthy start. So I will be looking in a lot of cases to start them both. I would be more bullish on Green Bay if I wasn't so worried about Jacobs' health. So I might even play a little Emmanuel Wilson.
Huh?
He's a little beat up. So, and the reason I'm leaning Chicago on this pick, Chicago's been an opportunistic defense, and Jordan Love has been willing to give up the ball occasionally. So I think they could put some pressure on. Again, just boy, I'd probably be more comfortable taking Chicago in the points in this one because I think it's going to be closer.
Well, our final tough. My problem is the Montague. Where do I flip him? In other words, Montague versus Fidel. What do you think? There's our final flex, Dennis. That's going to be a tough decision, isn't it?
I'd probably lean Montague because the Chargers this year have wanted to have a primary back, and I'm a little bit worried about Herbert's health. So I'm wondering if that Chargers offense is going to be a little bit weaker. And let's say Herbert can't start. Mm-hmm. That's a big drop off at quarterback against a very good Philadelphia Eagles team and defense. especially that interior
Well,
defense.
we're going to
Now,
cover that on the matchup lab,
yeah,
so
and
we'll
Carter's
remember
out.
that question
Yeah,
here.
and Carter's out, so that hurts the Eagles defense a little bit, but
The look into
we'll circle
Vegas
back on
says,
that one.
yeah, low scoring. Philly should, be ahead 3 points. So, yeah, Vegas thinks Philly has the advantage there, and I'm probably agreeing with that. You
Yeah,
want to
we'll
do
dig
one
into
more,
that
or we?
game more. Yep, let's look at one more. Let's
Okay.
look at, you know, I heard that there's this team called Kansas City that's in a
Oh,
must-win situation. Let's look at Kansas City and Houston.
okay. Power rankings, Dennis. Kansas City, where are you? Kansas City, are you? Let's see. It's Houston. There's Kansas City. Their league
Yep,
average, Houston. So there's nothing there. Passing, skewing. Kansas City's all about the rush this week, Dennis. Isn't that
interesting.
interesting? Last week they
That's
were all
very
about the
interesting.
pass. Isn't that?
Yeah,
Again, Houston's all about the pass. So Houston's going to be passing. So I don't know about my Woody Mark shares. Kansas City's going to be rushing. So they're going to probably sprinkle it around. Is Hunt going to play this week?
yes, yeah. Hunt will be in there.
So he'll be the red zone guy.
Yeah,
13. Yeah, I don't know how I'm
it
gonna.
it probably will be getting more usage than Pacheco again this week.
Boy, Pacheco's had a. It's been a tough.
Pacheco's been a rough year.
Yeah, I know. Okay, look at the Daps, Dennis.
Woo!
Play nobody. Play the Houston kicker. Field goal
Wow.
point.
Yep. Yep.
24-18, 3 points. KC's at home. There's the 3 points. This looks like whoever makes the less mistakes
Yeah.
could win
Yeah.
this game, Dennis. And I'm
Yep.
I'm leaning to KC because of that. Not that Houston's not good, but Houston's never seen a Kansas City D at home like this. Their Kansas City's is close to league average in
Ugh.
efficiency. Houston's a little less. Kansas City plays equally tough away or at home, but at home, look at this. Rush, look at 60.
Wow.
They love rush and 8% less passing. So the passing is going to set up the rushing. So they'll pepper Rice and Kelsey, and that's going to set up Kareem Hunt or whoever to fall in, or maybe even Mahomes gets a touchdown this week. That may be your secret bat play of the week, your Batman play of the week here is anytime touchdown, Mahomes slips in that end zone. There you go. And maybe a Nico Collins, Mahomes parlay there, maybe. Houston away, they love to pass, 7%. So again, Woody Marks, 9% less rushing, 7% more passing. But look at what they're. I think they're going. If Houston wins, it's because their rushing kept the KC spicy, enough that they could win. But it looks tough to me. I'm not happy with any of this. But KC at home against a tough Denver, Houston away, a tough defense. I think passing's the way, but I think they're going to have Woody Marks punch a few holes to open up the passing even more. But Higgins and could be a doublet there, 2 touchdowns for those guys. So that could be. I need some Schultz out of this too, by the way, and Kelsey. I need 52 points, Dennis, not 42. But I'm
Yeah.
picking Kansas City, but these DAPs do worry me about the whole game.
Yeah, I'm taking Kansas City, and typically you look at Kansas City and you say, man, I wouldn't want to play an under on a 42 because they typically are a high 40s and into the 50s over under, but this is going to be a defensive struggle. I don't think there'll be enough wind to be a major factor, but I think the defenses don't need a lot of help in that. I think Kansas City will try to lean into the run, but I'm not sure they're going to get there and be able to run consistently. So I think Mahomes is going to have to show a little Mahomes magic. I'm going to say it's going to be one of those rare low scoring Kansas City games. So I'm going with the under, and I'm reluctantly taking the Chiefs. This is a must-win game at home, and I think that little home field advantage. I think it's going to be a tight game. I think that 3-point spread is pretty accurate. But boy, it's going to be a tough one. But I think Kansas City will prevail. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. Check out all the data from the professor, because he always has so much good stuff to share with us. I got a couple of articles up there as well.
Do.
Head on over to the sportsaffiliation.com. Check out their YouTube page, like and subscribe. Check out the Matchup Lab coming out later this fine Saturday. And next week, Professor, unfortunately, no Wednesday podcast for us. I will be on assignment in Indianapolis, Indiana, hosting a seminar next week. So I will not be available, but come on back here next Saturday for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.